Alabama and Georgia face off in Tuscaloosa on Saturday night. Huge night for the quarterbacks. Let's talk about Jalen Milroe, Ari, because this is a guy who played maybe his best game as Alabama's starter against Georgia in the SEC championship game last year. You and I saw him in person at Wisconsin the last time Alabama played. He looked like an even better quarterback this year than he was last year. And now he leads a team that I think is pretty loaded in terms of skill position talent against maybe the best defense he's going to see all season.
Yes. And we're talking about a player, too, that has probably had maybe the most profound or at least drastic personal evolution and development over the course of the past calendar year. You know, if you go back and you look at last year's, loss at Texas, you might have seen a very talented athlete who struggles to throw the ball and isn't always, reliable in passing situations. And what we've come to find out here is that he throws a very beautiful deep pass. He's becoming more accurate in the mid to intermediate game and is explosive as a runner. So, I don't think it's a surprise when you have a coach like Kalen DeBoer, who is an offensive mastermind and somebody who we knew was going to bring the quarterback along. But in a game against Georgia on national television, one of the 5 probably most exciting games we were going to get this year on paper coming into the year, if he has a pretty big game or does some things that, the country doesn't think he can still do because they haven't been paying attention, then you have somebody who not only is leading Alabama back into the top 3 and probably to number 1, but also getting a lot of people's attention for him in the Heisman discussion.
So this preview is brought to you by Prize Picks, best daily fantasy sports game in America. Download that app. Use the code STAPLES. You play $5, you get $50 instantly. The way you play it is you choose squares. You choose as few as 2. The more you pick, the higher the potential payout. And for example, you got your Jalen Milroe passing yard square. So you decide, do you think, will Jalen Milroe in this game throw for more than or less than 203.5 passing yards? And before we get too deep into this, I want to throw some stats out there. So that excellent game that you and I saw him have against Wisconsin, he only threw for 196. Now, it was a ridiculously efficient 196. He was 12 of 17. So he completed 71% of his passes, 11.5 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, no picks. It's a great game. And
Andy, 72 of those yards, I think, came in 17 seconds before halftime. If you remember that 2-play drive that they had, it was 2 boom, boom. So, it wasn't like an explosive all-around game for him. Efficient is the right word.
But it could have been if they needed it to.
For sure.
It's pass attempts we're talking about here. But I'll go back to that game I was talking about last year when they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. He was 13 of 23, which 8.3 yards per attempt against last year's Georgia defense is really good. It's not the greatest completion percentage in the world, but only 192 yards. But they did enough to win the game. And so this is you're not worried about stats. You're worried about winning the game. But I do think for Alabama to win this game, the version of this game where Alabama wins, I think he throws for more than 203.5, because I think you look at this year, his worst game is the USF game, obviously. And that was the one where his 2 starting offensive tackles didn't play at all for 3 quarters. And then one of them, Elijah Pritchett, got put in for the 4th quarter, and magically everything got better. So Caden Proctor and Elijah Pritchett are playing against Georgia. We'll see if Mykel Williams, Georgia's best pass rusher, winds up playing. But I think this is a case where Jalen Milroe is going to have a little time to throw. I don't think Georgia is going to be like Wisconsin where he had all day to throw. But I think he'll have a little time to throw. I think Georgia is going to be a little bit careful because they're afraid of him running the ball. He's going to get a chance to throw the ball 20 times. And if he throws the ball 20 times and is playing the kind of game he's been playing, I think he's got that more than.
Yeah. And the thing, too, that we have to have a discussion about is, Andy, how much do you believe going into this game that Jalen Milroe has advanced in terms of his personal traits? Do you feel like he is a different quarterback, a more reliable player in the passing game? Do you think Kalen DeBoer got the coaching tentacles around him and made him a better quarterback? Because I think that if you do, it has to reframe the way that you view this game in general, but how you view Alabama as a legitimate national championship contender this year. Because I do think that there is still some of this Georgia brain out there where, despite the fact that Alabama beat them in the SEC championship game, that people just assume that Saban's gone, Alabama isn't what they were, Georgia's still the Darth Vader of college football, and that they're just going to beat the crap out of them. So, like, I think Milroe is probably the player in this game more than any other individual player that will tell the story of whether or not Alabama wins.
Yeah, I think he's the key to it. And look, he's got great pieces around him. I think he's got more talent around him than he had last year. I think you add Ryan Williams into the equation, even losing Isaiah Bond to Texas. I think adding Ryan Williams just changes the dynamics. If you're the defense, you're afraid of Ryan Williams just going over top.
And Jeremy Bernard gets open all the time too. Like, yes, he's a really good receiver that no one talks about. Like, this guy is open all the time if you watch the tape.
Yeah, a transfer from Washington who really would have put up huge numbers at Washington, except for the fact that Washington had 3 incredible receivers ahead of him. So that's the thing. I think Milroe's got more to work with right now than he had even in that SEC championship game last year. I think he's due for a good one, and I do think we probably will be looking at him differently